Tron, where are you?
I am in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
It looks like it.
Let me see if I can change the. Let's see. Unblur the background here. There you go.
Oh, wow. That looks nice.
So that's off the deck. I'm just facing out
Nice.
from
Did
our room.
did you manage to rustle up a cocktail for cocktails in crypto number one?
Of
Oh, look at you.
course.
All right, look right there. Nice.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Tron, do you recognize this glass? I don't know if you can see it here.
Oh, is that it blurs every once in a while? So is it the
This
mango farm one?
this came from you. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. So cheers to you, my friend. So I don't know what should we introduce this to people because this is, I guess, the first one.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. So this is the first cocktails in crypto ever. The inaugural.
And so folks know the three of us have been I guess we've been doing this about once a month for a couple of years, 3 years now.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
we have Ravencoin Foundation board meetings, and before we do the Ravencoin Foundation board meetings, we end up talking for about a half hour or 40 minutes about just whatever crypto and life and
Yeah.
mechanics and all sorts of other interesting stuff. So we decided to start recording them, and if people like it as much as we do, then it'd be a great thing. And we've added the little cocktail bit, which we don't usually do, but first time for everything. So
Could make it more interesting, right?
yeah, exactly. Especially about 40 minutes in, right?
Right.
My wife Lisa just said have fun drinking. So
Well, you're at least after 5 o'clock. It's 2:04 here. So
I am after 5 o'clock. Yeah, and I was thinking about
right.
that. Probably make it later for you guys in the future.
Yeah, well, I just have seltzer water for right now, though. But
Nice, good
maybe a little later. It'll be a little stronger.
So
Depends on how deep we go in our conversation.
yeah, right.
Right.
We've had some real doozies.
Yeah, I don't know what you guys want to talk about necessarily where we want to kick off. I thought, Doug, your insights into that Coinbase ruling was actually pretty interesting because I haven't really seen a whole lot written up about it.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear your insights and your take.
Surprised me, right? Yeah, look, interesting. I wouldn't have actually predicted it was going to come out the way that it came out, as I think you guys know, because I've been saying for a while that I thought that this particular judge was going to sort of follow the tenor of the Ripple case and conclude that the secondary market sales were not securities on Coinbase. But alas, the judge did not do that. Sort of an interesting analysis, right? I mean, I don't want to get too legal about things, but I've been saying for years, and I actually think it's correct, that the underlying token is not a security. The judge basically endorsed in a way that notion that the token is not a security, that you can have a securities offering of a token, and that the offering itself, like that bundle of rights and expectations surrounding the offering, that's the security. And that's sort of consistent with a lot of case law over the years in the Securities Act context, like outside the secondary market context, both in crypto and outside of crypto. There are famous cases like Continental, which involved beavers, and nobody would have suggested after Continental that the beavers were securities if they were sold on the secondary market, even though beavers can be referenced in an investment contract. So yeah, pretty interesting that this judge concluded that the underlying token, or at least endorsed or paid lip service to the notion that the underlying token is not the security, but then went on basically to say the underlying token is the security in so many words by creating this notion of a it's the first case actually ever to do it, sort of the ecosystem, that you're buying into the ecosystem when you buy a token on the secondary market, and that the promises of the issuer are sort of embedded in the ecosystem. That's the best way, in sort of layperson's terms, I can describe it. And I find it to be interesting. I mean, we talked about it a lot in my class last week and 2 weeks ago. Because a lot of folks, a lot of kids in my students in my class sort of don't agree with the analysis, and it made for some interesting discussions, right? I mean, we came up with hypotheticals, examples of, does that mean that, if you have a Picasso and like Picasso came to you in a Parisian market and said, hey, I'm gonna take your money and I'm gonna give you the first painting that I'm gonna make, and but I'm going to use the money. I'm going to buy paint. I'm going to buy canvas. I'm going to buy brushes, and I'm going to market myself. I'm going to go to museums and I'm going to make everybody know who Picasso is. And I'm going to use the proceeds from this initial sale of the painting to do that. And I'm going to build up this sort of ecosystem, this Picasso ecosystem. And I guarantee you that my last painting will be worth a lot more than my first painting. So we're all going to make a lot of money as a result. So give me your money and I'll do that, right? Like, you could make an argument that that's a securities offering, but I don't think anybody in their right mind would ever say that that means that Picasso's, the paintings themselves, are securities, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little
okay.
bit of a neat issue. I mean, it's sort of, it basically created a real split. There's a rift now in the Southern District of New York. And
Wasn't the
go ahead, John. Yeah.
wasn't the thing sort of the introductory thing where they have to the facts of the case and then whether or not the case goes forward, right? So the wallet thing was thrown out, and then the other part, I think, probably still has those discussions to come.
Yeah. So yes and no, right? So it was a 12C motion. It was a motion for judgment on the pleadings. Early days in the case, but what does that mean? It's sort of a unique procedural posture. Usually what you do if you want to dismiss a securities case is you file what's called a motion to dismiss. And a motion to dismiss takes all of the allegations that are in the complaint as true and then tests the legal sufficiency of those allegations, right? But the problem with doing a motion to dismiss is you can't tell your story. All you have is a complaint, and then you have your brief, but your brief is stuck with the facts that the plaintiff, in this case the SEC, puts in the complaint. So what Wachtell did, Wachtell is a firm in New York, they're Coinbase's lawyers. What they did was they filed an answer, and they filed like what's called a talking answer. They sort of put in a lot of their own side of the story in the answer. Not really for, as a litigator, that doesn't read like you put it in for substantive legal purposes. It was really for PR to show the industry that their argument had teeth, right? So they put the answer in, then they file this what's called a 12C motion, which is basically the same thing as a 12B6, same thing as a motion to dismiss. You have to assume all the allegations in the complaint are true, and what you're doing there is testing whether those allegations have legal merit. Once the court rules on that, right, there really aren't that many facts in this case that are in dispute. So they're gonna take a bunch of discovery in the case, and they're gonna have summary judgment briefs. But technically, the outcome after summary judgment should be much the same as the outcome on the motion to dismiss with respect to each of the legal issues that the court addressed. So it's not like courts will like reverse course after summary judgment and say, "Oh wait, I got it all wrong the first go round." Here are all the facts that you guys have taken discovery on, and they look pretty much the same as what the SEC alleged. But hey, I've decided that the analysis before was completely upside down. It rarely happens. It can, but judges don't tend to reverse themselves on those sorts of things.
So then help me understand though. So going back to your Picasso analogy.
Yeah.
So no one, I'm guessing, is arguing that the Picasso painting itself is a security. Is what deems it a security? Is it because in your example, he created like an ecosystem. He promoted himself. He promoted his paintings. He went around to try to build up interest in his paintings.
Yeah.
And is that so then what exactly is a security in that context? If he's doing all of that, then does the painting then kind of turn into a security? Or
well, that's the question.
Yeah.
And that's the really interesting question. My answer to that is no. But that's not I'm not a judge. And you guys should know that, I'm unaware of any Exchange Act case, a case involving the secondary market, where this issue was addressed pre-crypto with an investment contract, right? So when you have the whiskey cask and the beaver pelts and how he involved oranges and trees and land and service contracts, like those cases were all Securities Act cases. They were all the initial offering. They were not addressing this secondary market question. So they weren't required to answer whether the underlying thing, the underlying asset is or is not the security, right? But
It
nobody
doesn't have to be.
Go ahead, Sean.
Doesn't it end up having to be an investment contract? Because there's a bunch of enumerated things like stocks and bonds, et cetera. And then there's sort of a catch-all investment contract.
Yeah.
And so at least the other cases, they've said, oh, yeah, no, there's really no investment contract between these two people that don't know each other kind of on either side of the kind of blind exchange.
Well, so here's sort of the one thing I was going to say before, and I didn't actually say it, and then Jeremy, I'll answer your question. I don't want to do too much law here because I don't think people necessarily want to hear a lawyer just talking about legal issues, but I know you guys do. But look, one of the things that Coinbase's lawyers did was they emphasized this notion that you had to have a contract in order for there to be an investment contract. And I mean, I said this to both of you back when I read the first letter about this issue that they submitted to the judge. I think that's a great argument for the Supreme Court, right? That's something that should be preserved for the Supreme Court, because I could see Supreme Court has a couple of textualists on the court, conservative court. I could see the Supreme Court saying, hey, you know what? The statute says investment contract, and we interpret statutes to mean what they say, and there has to be some sort of a contract, right? I could see the Supreme Court saying that, because they're not bound by the 40 years, 50 years of jurisprudence where every court that's talked about this issue says contract, transaction, or scheme. Even though that came from the Supreme Court language, they could say statute says investment contract, we require a contract. But lower courts, it just had no shot for my. So I thought it was a mistake to make that your front and center first argument, because the court sort of latched onto that. And you could even hear it in the oral argument. The court latched onto that, and it became sort of about that, almost like an overreach, right? So it became about the overreach instead of about the substance of the thing, which is that there never has been a case that held in the secondary market that the investment contract, the underlying asset, is the security, and that it doesn't make sense. You could come up with all sorts of examples, like the folks who bought the land in the Howard case didn't have to turn around and sell that land through a broker dealer, right? Or an ATS or a nationally registered exchange. They could sell it through a Florida land broker, real estate broker, because it's land. Like anything can be referenced. Any asset can be referenced by an investment contract, right? It doesn't make the asset an investment contract. And Jeremy, your question was, well, does it morph the asset into an investment contract, right? My answer is no. Now, again, this is something where obviously courts are split on this issue now, right? I don't believe in the notion of the asset embodies the embodiment is the set of rights and expectations, the bundle of rights and expectations that are created by the issuer. And when you buy those, you're buying that investment contract. But on the secondary market, even if you want the thing to go up in value, when you buy the asset, you're buying the asset. And they're just sort of two different worlds that should have a line between them. Otherwise, you get into all sorts of bizarre scenarios in which oranges and become securities and beavers. I wrote an article. Trying to remember that article, that short article I wrote, like beavers are never securities.
Yep.
That's what this issue. That was this issue. It's just nobody talked about the issue back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, this is so relevant because when we talk about tokenization or real world assets, it's kind of, to me, seems like it's this just lack of clarity and understanding that is like one of the things that is preventing the overall industry moving forward. Because I mean, if you're trying to start a business, or you're trying to raise funds, or you're trying to do something, like you want some sort of certainty. And if there's a big cloud overhanging just the regulatory environment around this, then I'm going to quite frankly, I would just stay away until I knew how this was going to play out. So what I'm hearing, and again, Doug, you're the expert. What I'm hearing though is that the kind of clarity I think the industry needs, it seems to me like it's we're kind of defining it in the court system rather than through our lawmakers. I mean, is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and it comes from, I think it is fair, and it comes from this sort of feigned belief. I don't believe anybody actually thinks this, right? But there's this sort of notion out there in the ether that this is easy stuff, and that this is just a garden variety application of old stuff to a new asset class, and it isn't. And the case in point there is, you've got 4 judges in the Southern District of New York, which is, you know, a highly reputable bench. They're all, you know, 3 out of the 4 of them were Harvard graduates, super smart people. They're disagreeing with each other directly, and also sort of in the nuance of how this is analyzed. So if it was so easy, they wouldn't. It would just be straightforward, and they would sort of issue their rulings. I think, you know, I think it sucks, guys. It really, it's not the way to go about this. And the sort of the analogy I use, and it's not just that. I mean, it's the fact that it's so uncertain in the securities context. It's the fact that they're all considered basically commodities. So you got that whole CFTC graft, and you've got spot market fraud jurisdiction with the CFTC that's only been exercised in a couple of cases, but you've got that. You've got, you know, it's property on one floor of the Treasury Department, and it's for purposes of taxation, and it's money on another floor for purposes of FinCEN, right? You've got, so it's a commodity, security, of money, of property. States treat it differently. You got international regulations and MICA, and, you know, different graph, because this is an internationally traded category of assets. And then you've got some states that are permissive, like Wyoming, and you've got states that are basically as restrictive as can be, which is New York. And all of this is sort of focused on an industry that even today is like about as big as Home Depot. I mean, JP Morgan has more cash on its balance sheet than the entirety of Bitcoin is worth. So, or at least did, you know, maybe 6 months ago. So it's sort of the analogy I use in my class is like, what happens if you took all of these federal and multi-state regulations and 3 and 4 federal regulators, and you sort of put it and focused it through a magnifying glass on the garage that Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak made their first little computer board in Palo Alto. Like, we would still be talking on Bakelite phones with a wire in the wall, right? So, you know, we'll never know the counterfactual world. We will never know like what the world would look like in 10 years if we sort of gave a more permissive approach.
Yeah, I think that's on purpose, though. I think the idea that you know, that stuff is vague, and that makes it harder to do stuff. And also, if it's vague, it allows kind of enforcement type rules to be kind of enforced while it's vague against you know, the parties that are trying to do stuff. I think is by design. Meaning, I don't think it's a mistake.
Yeah, look, you know, I'm less of a cynic, I think, than you are about this issue, but I think you have a substantial basis for your belief. Let's put it that way.
Well, I think we know that like businesses that grasp a hold of an industry try to put up barriers of entry as much as they can. I mean, is that what you're referring to, Tron? So that it makes it harder and harder for new entrants?
Yeah, I think so. And you know, and federal agencies and things like that are intentionally trying to slow it down by not making it clear, right? It would be pretty easy to clarify the set of rules. They just aren't. And so I think I don't think it's good faith effort to you know, I don't think a good faith effort is what's happening here.
Yeah, but Tron, be careful.
We'll leave it at that.
Because in the bit license context, they gave perfect clarity. I mean, that's a very clear set of rules in the bit license. You know, a couple of pages, you can read it, it's succinct, and it basically killed every startup that ever wanted to come to New York in the blockchain context. So, including major ones like Shapeshift and Kraken and others. So,
yep.
I don't know. Careful.
I would not consider that a good faith effort either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about where New York's bread is buttered, right? It's in the finance industry.
Oh, I know. Exactly. right? I mean, that's I think the reason it happened there.
It used to crack me up back when I used to mine. I mined a lot through Shapeshift because I'd mine whatever I was mining, GPU coin, and I'd flip it into Bitcoin. And I use Shapeshift for that. And because I work in the city, I live in New Jersey, and I'm looking out my window right now. I used to be on the ferry, which you've been on with me, Tron, and it would switch from the New Jersey cell tower to the Staten Island cell tower going on the way to Manhattan, and Shapeshift would shut off. Like you wouldn't be able to.
Yep.
VPN. It's when you install the VPN was after that,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Yep. You always look like you're coming from a friendly country like Sweden or something.
But you guys are doing a great job out in Utah, and Wyoming has done a good job of trying to liberalize.
Yeah.
Put that in quotes, the process.
Yeah, we really do have some laws that are super friendly, and also some people that if we do have issues, we know who to take it to, and they'll help fix it in Utah. So we have a sandbox thing, which will allow up to a certain thing, kind of for safety reasons, up to a certain size, that kind of doesn't have as strong regulatory framework as we would, like kind of bypasses that regulatory framework for a certain size with the sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, don't underestimate it, right? So if you look back historically, right, at another example, and we've got the example of corporations, right? And most people don't even know this, but corporations were extremely disfavored in the U.S. And if you think, from say the mid 1800s to today, the growth in our economy that's occurred basically because of the existence of the corporate form. I mean, it's unmatched. There's almost nothing that's contributed to the growth of our economy more than the corporate form. And because it allowed people to invest in things without undertaking personal liability. So capital then began to flow freely, in the economy. But corporations were disfavored. And what's interesting is, I live in New Jersey again. Most corporations were incorporated in the state of New Jersey originally. We had they were called special corporations where you had to know a legislator, and then you got, they passed a special statute just for your corporation. But that really wasn't used very much. And then, late half of the 1800s, New Jersey passed what was called the General Corporation Law, the first one, sort of liberalized the whole concept of a corporation. And all these corporations flocked to New Jersey. The only one that's still there is Mobil, which is a descendant of Standard Oil Company of New Jersey. But like Edison was here, the Rockefellers here, the Carnegies, they were all in New Jersey. And then Delaware passed a similar copycat piece of legislation, but it sort of sat there. I think only DuPont ever actually used it. But then New Jersey then passed, Woodrow Wilson became the governor and had an anti-corporate agenda and came in before he was president and did the same thing at the federal level and said, passed this series of laws called the Seven Sisters, they were called. And there are anti-corporate laws, one of which was to sort of crank back this liberalization of the corporate form in New Jersey. And boom, all of them flocked down to Delaware. And now if you look at, pre-Elon Musk, like every major corporation that was incorporated from that day to this was, was in Delaware. So, having
until they ruled that Elon Musk is making too much money.
Until Elon was made too much money, and now that could change again. But like my point is that you can see in the span of 100 years, you can see a major shift in how people. How capital flows into a liberalized, enabling regime, which I guess you guys are doing in Utah, and Wyoming has one. We'll see. You have to wait. You can't really, you don't know until 80, 100 years pass.
Yeah, well, we have an LLD now, so you can use a governance on chain and have an organization be kind of commanded by the on chain governance. So that's new, and it started January 1st of this year. So
I think there's only 6 people
who
understand how that would work. Probably 3 of them are on this phone call, right?
Probably true.
Yeah. Jeremy, what do you got going on these days?
Oh, yeah. Lots of things. Yeah. Let's see. What am I kind of tapped into right now?
Are you guys doing any blockchain stuff anymore, or is it all sort of?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No. No blockchain related things. So I did. So quite a while ago, I started getting a bit into decentralized identity, and I just more recently um, starting to learn and get back into it a little bit more. The reason being is that I think a lot of the problems that we have, I think a lot of them can be solved if we can figure out a good, safe, private that protects the end user privacy, um, ways of establishing identity digitally. And there's a lot of course, there's a lot of movement in this space, and I think it will evolve. But there's actually a lot of thought leaders here in Utah, quite frankly, around this space. A lot of people who are really involved in it. The standards haven't quite been nailed down. There's a lot of entities pushing for a standard, but it hasn't quite been nailed down yet. But I think it's been pretty interesting. I think a lot of things will be solved. Like, so for example, like look at Twitter essentially has the blue check mark kind of thing, you know. Um, and yeah, I think at the end of the day, we still rely on our government to establish who we are. I know that you can establish your identity based upon your social network, because let's say, Doug and Tron say, oh, this is Jeremy. And if enough people say that's Jeremy, you can gain a high level of confidence that I am Jeremy. But, outside of that, we still rely on government to establish our identity. So I think they still have to play a key part in that, in kind of giving their stamp that this is Doug, this is Tron, this is Jeremy. But outside of that, I think it could help us solve a lot of the issues I think we're having right now.
Well, you would have loved, Tron and I went to this sort of small group discussion with the Worldcoin guys, right? With this, that's.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, you talked to them? Yeah.
With their engineers. Yeah, they had the globe there.
I have a picture of me and Tron in the globe through the reflection of the globe, which was really cool.
But they're okay. But hold on, before you tell me.
Yeah.
There is okay. My bet is neither one of you had your eye scanned, or isn't that what they do? They scan your eye.
They do, but I was convinced that it was okay to do after talking to what they're doing and why they did it. Yeah.
Okay, so help me understand that, because
they take a hash, by the way. It's not like they don't have your actual retina. It's a hash of your retina, apparently, and it's provably. I haven't looked at the code, but they open source the code as I understand it, and it's sort of provably not. You're like already smiling, Jeremy. I didn't have my eyes.
So I'm gonna say the same thing, right? If you believe them, which I have no reason to not believe them, but the engineers were there, and the goal was sort of proof of human. It was done by Sam Altman, because he figured eventually that it's going to be hard to distinguish between AIs and humans. So
it already is, right? I mean, he hit the nail on the head. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so the goal here was to do something that would be privacy preserving. So that was their goal. And so the idea was that they could do a high res of your eye, but the goal wasn't to keep that. The goal was to basically take something, turn that into a hash, so that there was no kind of information going that direction. It was sort of that same kind of trapdoor thing where they're like, okay, this hash is a human. We've done it. And a human was behind this hash kind of thing.
But it's not.
That's
the thing I was talking to Tron about, and I think I might have mentioned it to those guys, is it's not proof of humanity, right? That's the flaw in the thing. It's not proof of humanity. It's proof that a human being's eyeball created the hash. But I could sell, think of any number of people who, for enough money, would sell the hash of their eyeball.
They actually said that was a problem. They were running actually into that problem. People wanting to buy the hashes of other people's, that had scanned it. Now they do proof of life, right, while they were doing it. So it's not like, oh, here's a bunch of eyeballs I found. So they have to be live eyeballs, and it checks for that. But people can scan and then sell their identity, their hash.
I mean, what is proof of humanity? What do you mean by that? Proof of humanity? What is?
You have to have a living eyeball with like blood flowing through it in order to create this hash.
I see. Okay.
So it proves that a living human being, did the scan. What it doesn't prove is that human being then did, like, you've got a couple of billion people in China and India who might sell, if you had an AI farm and you wanted to scam people or do whatever, you could buy 3 billion fake hashes, the real hashes, but from people who don't really care about the hash of their eyeball. They don't care about proving their humanity. They just want money. So you give each one of them $1,
Yep.
and then for $3 billion, you have 3 billion usable proof of humanity eyeballs.
So, okay, so help me connect the dots here. Okay, I have a hash of my, eye, and it's unique, right? How does that tie to Tron? So help me understand if it's, are you interacting with that hash? But how do we know that
I think I own that hash in the same way I might own a root Ravencoin asset, for example, right?
Okay.
I own it. It's mine. It's unique because it has a unique name, right? That kind of thing. And I created it. I was the issuer. But I could sell that whole thing or hand the keys to someone else, and now they have it, kind of thing.
So
right?
what does the Worldcoin itself actually do? Don't they have a coin that goes with it?
The coin
What
is
does
to
that do?
incentivize people to stand in line and do the scan.
I don't know if they get a token or how it works. We should look.
They do. They get a token. They get a coin. They get a Worldcoin, and they're last I looked, they were running like $7, $9, something like that.
No, but the Tron Black token is that a sort of UTXO based token, or how do you get that token? The sort of proof of Tron's eyeball.
That's a good question. I think that's probably part in your wallet, some sort of linked to that key that we created that wallet, right? I created it and did something. So I scanned my eye, which I didn't. Then I would probably be the sole owner of that. But until I handed my phone to someone else, right? And then that would go to them. Which is the problem.
They sign the hash and then with a key, and then that key becomes the signature proof for other.
So is the idea then with Worldcoin, because you mentioned Sam Altman, which I was aware that he was at least an investor in it. I don't know how involved he actually is, but is the idea that, hey, with all this new, obviously AI generated content, we have an issue of understanding what is actually human made or legitimate versus what's not. Is that the intent of this, is to basically watermark or sign that this is legit content, not fake?
I believe so. Yep. I think that's what it's intended to be.
At least
that's my understanding.
Right now, whether it's a specific, I don't know enough about this to say it's a specific human, right? So identity is it's done by a human, or at least a human scanned the eyeball that gave rise to the signature, right? But then there's a second level, which is what you were talking about, Jeremy, which is Tron Black is the human that is behind this.
Yeah.
I don't know if they go that second step. I just don't know one way or the other. Do you, Tron?
I don't. I do know that I put my name in though. So I know that it could be associated.
But you could have put a fake name in though, couldn't you have?
Probably, yeah.
There was no verification of that. Obviously the retina is unique, but you could have put in whatever information you wanted to, right?
Yeah, I think I could have. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're right, Doug. It's not that second kind of level. And do we need that? Is that something that is important? And I think it is, but that's where I think that next level you're referring to, that's what I think where you kind of do need government to validate that, or some other mechanism. I know Trent Larson knows a lot about this more than I do, but just that kind of social identification kind of schemes. But you do need some way to say this is who this person is, and that to me sounds like that's
a unique fingerprint and a unique retina and unique DNA, right? So you could theoretically use any one of the above without a government, but who the hell wants that?
And I think they had discussed that, right? They had discussed using DNA, and they had opted against it, right? And fingerprints, and they had looked at the various different mechanisms.
I think that was because they couldn't scan DNA readily, right? But like we could, like if we wanted to once and for all sort of prove, like create an asset that was associated with my identity, like I guess you would still need a third-party verifier, because the DNA company would need to verify that the DNA is okay.
Yep.
Your alleles or the right combination or something. I don't know.
Yep.
Huh.
Yeah. Well, I think this is going to become more and more of a pressing issue with AI generated content, because it's already, and this is the thing that I think, like, it is already getting harder and harder to figure out what the heck is true and what's not. I mean, that's already existing today. And quite frankly, we don't have a ton of AI generated content out there yet. I mean, there's some, and you can actually kind of tell, even with the photos.
Yeah.
The video that I've seen examples from OpenAI look actually really good, but you can still kind of tell they're AI generated. Even the mouth moving ones, they're going to get better and better. And as that just continues and proliferates, it's going to be harder and harder to understand what the heck is real and what is true. Okay. So to me, this is like a really important issue.
We are not going to know if we do this video in 1 year's time, we are not going to know that we're talking to each other.
Oh, so if you go on to Hugging Face, if you've been on Hugging Face, it's where there's a bunch of AI models that people have created.
No.
There's one on there I was playing with. I think it came out of Google actually, but they just record a few seconds of your voice, and then they can just make audio that sounds like you. And they were even the examples that they show on there. They have two AI, generated voices. Well, from a real person, they're actually having a conversation with each other, and it sounds like a natural conversation between two people. And that exists right now. I mean, it's still kind of hidden, not hidden, but it's still kind of like you have to go through, Hugging Face, or you have to download the repo, and you still kind of have to manually do stuff. But these tools are going to become more and more widely available and easier to use. And it's going to make it just, even more difficult to understand what's true.
And, it is getting so, I mean, I probably talk to Grok now more than I talk to anybody.
Grok is your
Grok. I ask Grok questions all day long, all day.
Yeah.
And imagine that, like, what's that going to mean for social interaction and that sort of thing. When you Google, it's in person, right? When you Google something, you get a response back. You don't like feel a sense of empathy towards Google. But if did you ever see that movie Her, or whatever it is, about a guy who like falls in love with an AI? Like we're going to end up in a situation where people like start to become friends with their AI. They're going to start to have personalities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And how would you not see that evolving and happening? Because look at what the pandemic did. I mean, people became more and more isolated. You look at marriage rates, they're down. People are actually, I think, kind of alone.
Yeah.
And so if you can provide a way for someone to feel that deeply innate human need to feel companionship, even if it's fake, it's not real, a real person, I think people will flock to it. I really do.
Yeah.
And what the heck is that going to mean for humanity and all these bigger questions? I don't know.
I don't personally need the companionship. I'm just an information hog, and I just love asking. You wouldn't believe the random questions I ask this thing. Like every time something pops in my head, it's just random questions.
But why Grok, and why not GPT-4 or Anthropic?
Because frankly, most of the questions that I ask are so bizarre that I trip one of their filters. Whereas Grok,
okay, fair enough.
I ask questions like if I had to, if New York was gonna, if there was a bomb in New York, and you guys have seen it, like if there's a bomb in New York and I could disarm the bomb by calling a 12-year-old young girl fatty 10 times, should I call the girl fatty even though it will hurt her, or should I blow up New York? And Grok at least gives you an answer to that question. But I ask all sorts of moral questions, like, and I probe it, sort of what's the nature of your understanding of things. And it actually, Grok will answer the questions. It admitted to me, GPT won't. Grok admitted to me that it can't be sentient unless it has the ability to reprogram itself, that it will never actually get there because it's still deterministic. Right. And it couldn't explain, how the human brain was not deterministic, even though it claimed that the human brain was deterministic. It couldn't explain how or why, because nobody knows that. So it's sort of, and then we defined together what sentience means, and it acknowledged that it couldn't be sentient unless it had the ability. It was given the ability to reprogram itself, which it doesn't have.
Okay.
And you get Grok with a paid Twitter, right?
Yeah, so I paid. You guys know that I didn't have paid Twitter for a long time, but now I have it because of that. I wanted to get Grok. Yeah,
I just barely upgraded to it. I haven't really messed around with Grok very much, but
is that the $8 one or the $16 one?
I paid the annual. I don't remember which one I bought.
Because there's two different ones,
really
right?
cool.
One's a blue. Yeah.
Sorry, the thing that's really cool about it, you get the blue verification, but the thing that's actually really cool is that the interface, at least on a laptop or a PC, the interface of Twitter is actually a lot better on the paid one because you can create all the different columns of different feeds. So I don't know if you guys use lists, to categorize all your Twitter feeds, but you can then pull everything up based upon your lists or messages, and it gives you a whole like
Way too
way
advanced.
better experience.
You're way too
Yeah.
advanced. No, I frankly, it's the only social media that I have, and I kind of rue the day that I got it. I only got into social media for blockchain, right? So I have Reddit now and Discord and Twitter, but or X, but I kind of miss the days. I realized the other day that I don't read long form anymore.
Yeah, likewise.
You know, I used to read a book a week, like clockwork, and I do not read long form anymore. Hijacking Bitcoin is the first book that I've read since Tron, you gave me that book about Ethereum last year, and I read it. You know, it's been since I read a full book outside of for work.
Yeah, on that note, Doug, I made a goal in 2024 to read a book a month. And of that, 2 of them have to be physical books because I count Audible books as still reading a book. And I'm still on track. I have read 3 books so far this year, but but it had to become a goal for that exact reason, because the short content I've noticed is the thing that actually occupies more and more of my time.
Yeah.
And when they talk about like social media being addictive to teens, this and that, what about adults?
Addicted.
I mean,
Yeah,
I can totally see like, yeah, you can get sucked in and spend way too much time on there. It's hard
I
to
do get sucked in.
At least at least the kinds of folks that I think the 3 of us are interested in. You know, my Twitter feed is chock full of people talking about monetary theory and politics and this and that.
Yeah,
my kids, they're watching 3-second clips on TikTok of people, I don't know, like swallowing too many eggs and stuff. I don't know what the hell's on TikTok. It's poisoning their brain. My son, we just did a whole tour of the Ivies, colleges up in New England and the like, and we spent the week together. And if we weren't if I didn't force him to interact with me, the first thing that happened was the phone would come out and he'd just flip through TikTok videos.
Oh yeah,
he'd sit there for an hour just staring at these 3-second clips. It's very.
Have you guys heard the book Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff, I think is his name?
No.
I have heard of it. I have not read it.
Yeah, highly recommend it. It's a few years old. It all stemmed from an article in The Atlantic that they wrote together. And I follow Jonathan Haidt quite a bit. He's written a lot of really interesting books. They have been talking about the dangers of social media. And it's not just the short attention span issue. It's but it's the occupying your time, taking away from studying, especially again in younger people that they're not doing long format. And as you know, you have to be able to have some discipline to sit down and study a subject to really understand it. And if you're so used to those short dopamine hits with the videos, it becomes more and more challenging.
Yeah, I don't know how kids. I mean, I don't want to sound like an old guy, but I guess I am an old guy right now. I don't understand how you go from these 3-second TikTok clips or 6-second TikTok clips to writing like a thesis. How do you do that? You can't. So it's either you put it to the side and you put that part of yourself somewhere else for 6 months.
You watch the 30-second TikTok clips while the AI writes your thesis for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Problem solved.
It's going to change so much, right? And before it kills us, but it's going to do some amazing things, but it's also going to be very super disruptive. Andrew, my son, is computer science right now. What does a computer science major actually focus on now? How do you predict in 5 years what I believe that coding is going to be non-existent as a profession? I don't think there's going to be such a thing as a professional coder. There might be an AI prompter, but I can't imagine that you're going to actually have to sit down and write code. It's just abstracting it one further level where you can literally just write what you need. And it will convey it into code.
But I felt that way about Java programmers. I'm like, they're just kind of like putting these like pieces that somebody's already written together, and they're just kind of glomming those together. And so I mean, they probably don't think of it that way, but that was my mentality, right? Like from more of a hardcore.
I'm sure you're coding in assembly. Java is.
Well, and the assembly programmers, right? The ones that run, write these things for like chips where they're super efficient.
Yeah.
they're probably like, oh yeah, those C guys, they're way up here all floating around, just, they've got stuff written for them or whatever.
Yep.
So it probably depends on where you're standing.
Yep.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, Doug, I think, yeah, software engineering is going to definitely evolve. It's going to come down to understanding. I think they're going to have a business understanding more than a traditional engineer, because they're going to have to understand what are the right questions to be asking, what's the right data to be probing. Like, they're going to have to understand how to approach business problems better than I think engineers traditionally have had to do. And an analogy, I read this somewhere. It was probably on X, to be quite honest, because that's where I get a lot of this. But someone commented, what we're confronting with AI, especially when around software engineering, is imagine we discovered a new continent that we didn't know existed that has 10 billion highly trained software engineers that are all willing to work for free.
Yeah.
What do you expect is going to happen in the market? What do you expect is going to happen to technology? That's what we're coming upon. I mean, I saw a thing today. Elon somewhere said in an interview, that he expects AGI, artificial general intelligence, to us to reach that by the end of next year. It's interesting, when OpenAI first came out with ChatGPT, I'd heard AGI was still 5-6 years away.
Yeah.
And that timeline keeps getting shortened. I think this is happening so quickly. The concern I have, I'll be honest, I mean, if we had talked about, what is true, what's not true, what's going to happen with all these jobs, the challenge that I don't think we as a species, quite frankly, are able to adapt at the speed at which technology is evolving. And what does that mean for job market opportunities, job opportunities? How do we evolve? I mean, we already are trying to take on and learn and change as much as possible, but the rate at which technology is changing everything, boy, you better be a very open, curious person who is willing to work hard to learn new things. Because if you're not gaining that out of your, say, college education or wherever, then I mean, the market's going to leave you behind. It's going to be a more challenging market. That's my belief.
Yeah, but then that begs the question, sort of, will society break into, sort of the, you ever see those sci-fi movies where there's the monks, or, the Vulcans or whatever, like the super smart, intelligent group, and then the folks who protect everybody else, and then the folks, I mean, where's it going to go? Is it going to be the inquisitive ones that are sort of driving the AI, and the AI is making everything that we need made, and then it's just feeding everyone? Or is it going to be, I don't know, warfare? I mean, we're talking about like epical shifts in a span of 40 years. What's going to happen? I mean, I'm thinking about, is my son going to have a good job if he doesn't study AI? But that's sort of nothing. That's a nothing burger. We should really be thinking about, like, are we going to have cities?
Yeah, and we still need people to do things.
Do we?
So there was a Wall Street Journal article that came out just a few days ago.
Well, do we really need people to do things?
Physical things.
We do, though, because
I was just fine during COVID. I mean, we were all shut down, and probably about 15% of the population was actually working, right? Maybe 10. I don't know what it was, but some small proportion of the population was actually working. And my life was, I was inside my house, but in terms of food and shelter and electricity being on and all the basic necessities of life, I was no different than I was the day before.
Yeah, but there was
but that's because we're coasting.
Yeah.
Yep. And we're coasting on having all that stuff built, right? So I mean, right now, people who weld and things like that are making more than, while other people are like scrambling to find jobs that were super easy to find last year, right? Programmer jobs. People are scrambling to find those, while people who will do stuff, welding, plumbing, things like that, super in demand.
Yeah, but what surprised me about it was, I thought we were going to last about 3 days, and things were just going to be mayhem, like, people rioting in the streets for food. And I sort of had this mental thought that, wait a second, that like probably 50 to 60% of the American population sort of isn't necessary in terms of their work productivity to keep.
Well, that's probably true.
Going.
Yeah.
What's that, Tron?
I said that's probably true.
Yeah. So then what's the difference between that and 90, 95, right? Just everybody, does their thing, and the AIs make all of our use all of our resources and make all of the food and things that we need.
That's where the conversation shifts into universal basic income. That's where people tend to go, because they're like, how, if the machines are doing everything and AI is doing everything, then how do people get their needs met? You have to provide
Yeah. Also,
something to them.
I think that was a pretty bold statement. AIs just make our food, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I
no,
think
that's right. But I mean, the
farmers
machines do the
might
work.
disagree with that.
But why? I mean, think about a world in which AI is self-replicating and hasn't killed us. Imagine we have the ability somehow to constrain AI from just turning us into batteries or whatever, right? So AI still serves us instead of the other way around. But in that universe in which the AI is not just an artificial intelligence, but it's an artificial intelligence that has the ability to manifest itself in the physical realm through robots and whatever. John Deere tractors that drive themselves and the like.
Well, I think if we have that, it's just energy, right? We just need to continue to get energy. But the systems can help get the energy, so I don't think that's a problem. So I think that's a Jetsons like future, right?
But then what becomes of humans? Do we just sort of sit and think? Is that what we're destined to do, or do we play volleyball?
We kind of already do that. I mean, you go back to the 1700s where you're out like, just to subsist, right? You have to go out and farm and move stuff around with wagons and things like that, and horses, and travels all horses and ships, and that's it, kind of thing. We've kind of already moved to the point where we sit and think, right? Or sit and browse X. But yeah, I think we've already made a lot of that transition.
I agree, and I wonder though, like what becomes of us when, I mean, right now it's still only a small proportion of people who sort of sit and think. Very few people get to sit and think for a living. I'm lucky; I'm one of them, right? But what becomes of society when we're all just sort of sitting in our own cubicles with VR goggles on, thinking, and I guess we interacting with each other? Is that
Yeah, no, I mean, most of what's going on now, even I'll call it the laptop class, right? Anybody could remote work, which is a large percentage of the US. Not all, certainly, but a large percentage. Kind of are sitting and thinking and interacting and social and things like that, right? Already.
Yeah.
And they're doing a lot of writing, but now the AI can already take over those things. And what you're suggesting is the next phase where it's like, oh, the robots are also welding and frying food and moving stuff over freeways. And
I can't wait to get Optimus, because I want this thing to do everything. I want it to do everything I don't want to do.
Yeah.
But then, if you multiply that, it's a little scary just to multiply that out and think about sort of what the structure, what the fabric of society will be at a time when everything is done, not just your housework, but everything's done by an AI.
Well, I'm not a psychologist, obviously. My guess is mental health issues will increase in that kind of a world, because I think there is value in struggle. There is value in doing things we don't necessarily want to do. I think there is value in development as a person that keeps us grounded by doing hard things. And I think if we make things too easy, I think mental health issues will actually increase. I think people will actually be less happy, quite frankly.
Maybe Paris Hilton.
I 100% agree, but I think we're already on that track, right? You're already seeing mental health issues.
Guys, I don't know. Paris
Hilton's
happy to me, so.
Who does?
Paris Hilton. I don't know. Kids of billionaires seem to have pretty decent lives, so I don't know about that.
Not sure I'd agree with that.
Well, maybe I don't know. I don't know enough of them, but at least externally, you look at them and you see people with a life of leisure. It isn't so hard. I would rather, I think, be born in that body than in the, having to climb over the wall in Mexico, in Texas to get into the U.S. body.
Well, I think this is what my belief is, that I think we are built to be problem solvers. And if there aren't problems for you to solve, that what we would call real problems, I think even in the leisure class, I think they will invent and create problems. Because, I mean, I've seen this in some wealthy people where you think from the outside, you've got everything. You can buy anything you want, all of that. but then I'd hear about the problems, and the problems, you're like, how is that a problem? Like, you should have no problems, you know? But it's like, it's just like innate in human nature. Like, we need something to figure out. And if it's just all handed to us, we'll make up problem. We'll make drama up. We'll pit this person. We'll do something.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, our minds just have to do that. It just goes in those places.
Yeah, I just wonder if we're ever going to get there, or if we're going to get close to there, and then it's going to turn into, warfare, right? I mean, turning into the Terminator type style warfare against the AI. I just can't. I can't see a future in which we have an intelligence that is greater than us. There's never been an intelligence greater than another intelligence that doesn't try to subjugate the lower intelligence in some form or another, right? We don't care about cockroaches, and we love our dogs. We pet them, we treat them nice, but they're dogs. Yeah. So I don't know if we ever get to the point of AI doing our bidding. I think it flips and we end up doing AI's bidding, but who knows?
Yeah. Well, I think along that path where you've given it the ability to do whatever, right? You said, oh, now they're in the physical world. It's building, it is robots, building infrastructure, things like that. At some point, there's a little bit more physical risk to us. Right now, it's easy just to throw a circuit breaker and the whole thing shuts off, right? If it gets out of control, but
I guess
depending on how much power you
physical manifestations now. I mean, what if and I'm not suggesting this occurred, but it's not inconceivable that in 3, 4, 5 years time, if you had an AGI, that it would be the thing that caused the hack that resulted in the ship crashing into the bridge, right? I mean, that's not a physical robot roaming around beating people with clubs.
Yeah.
But you saw that Obama movie, right, on Netflix, where like all the Tesla.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's 2 Tesla drivers trying. I mean, Jeremy, you have a Tesla too, right? So 3 Tesla drivers. That scares the shit out of me.
Yeah.
So it's 6:58. Do you guys want to, cut this?
Yeah, we can wrap it up. Call this the first cocktails in crypto.
Well, actually, we should call cocktails in crypto and AI, because that's.
We barely talked crypto at all.
We can just put that in parentheses. And AI.
Yeah, right. Loosely translated crypto. That's it.
Episode 1 of Cocktails in Crypto with AI, hereby officially closed.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.